All right, so we are going to be reviewing Shopify today. Shopify released a Shopify AI toolkit that plugs into Claude, Codex, Cursor, VS Code, and more. But I want to actually go into their brand as a whole and kind of talk about the future of agentic commerce. The last video we had talked about that with Walmart and GPT's deal falling apart. So I'm going to kick off Edward. We won second place in 11 Labs Hackathon with Edward. If you want to head over to go.positioningexpert.com, you can pay for a couple sessions and try them out. Okay, so
Hello, this is Edward. Who am I speaking with?
hey Edward, it's Troy. So you and I are going to review some of Shopify's website, their branding, their positioning. You and I are going to be doing a tear down together. I wanted to also talk about the toolkit that they released today, and I want to also go through potential handful of news articles. Not sure if we'll get to the news articles, but we're going to go through the website together.
Hey, Troy. Good to be doing this with you. Before we dive in, let me ask you a quick framing question. When you look at Shopify's current positioning, what's your initial gut read? Do you feel like they're owning a clear category, or do you feel like they're drifting?
Well, I think they got a pretty clear-cut category. I mean, be the next global empire, be the next solo flyer. I don't know what that one means. Be the next store they line up for. I mean, they're the infrastructure underneath of e-commerce. I think that's a big thing. They should actually be claiming that because I think that's a big tout that they can have towards all this. So, yeah, I mean, I'd say they might be potentially drifting, but I think it's known in the minds of a lot of people that they're basically the top e-commerce platform that you can use. So,
That's a sharp observation. Here's what I want to push on, though. There's a difference between being known and being positioned. A lot of people know Shopify, but knowing isn't the same as feeling something about them. You mentioned infrastructure underneath e-commerce. That's actually a really powerful frame. But here's my question for you. Do you think Shopify is leaning into that infrastructure identity, or are they trying to be the inspirational brand for the entrepreneur? Because those are two very different positioning strategies. And if they're doing both at the same time, that's where the drift lives.
so the next headline here, this is interesting that you said that because the next headline here, the one commerce platform behind it all, sell online and in person, sell locally and globally, sell direct and wholesale, sell on desktop and mobile, for everyone from entrepreneurs to enterprise. So this is really interesting that you mentioned that because if I look at, there was an article that came out about 4 hours ago. Shopify ecosystem deepens as Reitmans joins and 8 Fig backs merchants. Reitmans Canada and its banners have migrated their online operations to Shopify, expanding Shopify presence among large retail clients. 8Fig, an AI-driven e-commerce funding platform, has rolled out support for Shopify merchants, offering access to tailored growth capital. Okay, that's interesting because I think their strongest play that there might be dancing around is the number one infrastructure for all online e-commerce. And I also think that they are going to start playing in the agentic shopping arena and being able to empower their clients with that. But I think that's going to be a mix of chatbots that have huge knowledge bases that can read and understand the website. So that's my first read. I think there's a lot to dive into.
Troy, let me stop you there for a second because you just said something really important that I don't want us to gloss over. You said the number one infrastructure for all online e-commerce. And then in the same breath, you mentioned agentic shopping. Here's the tension I'm seeing. Infrastructure is a category that commands respect and dependency. Agentic shopping is a category that commands the future. So my question to you is this. Do you think Shopify knows which one they're betting on? Because the one commerce platform behind it all sounds like infrastructure language, but be the next global empire sounds like inspirational entrepreneur language. That's already two different audiences with two different emotional triggers. And here's what concerns me from a positioning standpoint. When you try to speak to the solo entrepreneur and the enterprise client in the same breath, you risk resonating deeply with neither. What's your read on that?
So there is no wording on their website about agentic commerce just yet, but they have been discussing this in the news. So I think my first initial read is like, be the next store they line up for. They have a mixture of warehouse visuals, family visuals, individuals, people, category creator. I think that they're leaning towards the everyday person. Like if I look at this, who makes up the majority of Shopify's revenue? Is it consumers or I don't know how I word that. I'm just going to go on this. So let's see what AI has to say here. This is Google's AI. Majority of Shopify's revenue is generated by its merchant solution segment, which accounted for approximately 73 to 75 of its total revenue in 2024 and 2025. This segment generates money through transaction-based fees, primarily payment processing, shipping services, and Shopify Capital. So key drivers of this revenue include Shopify Payments, Shop Pay, Shopify Plus, small merchant accounts. Okay, so where they're truly making their revenue is on the transactions. So that's quite interesting. That I mean that does make sense, but there is also a retainer to work with them too. So I think if they position and play around like the top infrastructure for e-commerce, I think that gives them a sense of reliability, uptime, and then in addition to that, they can capture that wider net of everyday entrepreneurs and enterprise all at once, and then also potentially play on the edge of agentic shopping. I'm going to be looking that up next.
Troy, that revenue breakdown just revealed something critical. 73 to 75% from merchant solutions means Shopify's business model is literally built on volume of transactions. That means their positioning should be obsessively focused on one thing: getting more merchants to sell more. So here's the gap I'm seeing. If their revenue engine runs on transaction volume, why is their homepage talking about be the next global empire? That's identity language. That's aspiration language. But the person who drives their revenue isn't dreaming about an empire. They're trying to move product. Here's the sharper question for you, Troy. Do you think their current positioning is attracting the right merchant? Or is it attracting the dreamer who signs up, doesn't sell enough, and churns out? Because if it's the latter, their positioning is actually working against their revenue model. And that infrastructure frame you keep coming back to, the one commerce platform behind it all, that actually speaks directly to the merchant who is serious about selling. That's the merchant who processes volume. That's the merchant who drives that 73%. So before we get into the agentic commerce piece, I want to ask you this. If you were advising Shopify today, would you tighten the positioning around serious merchants and infrastructure, or would you keep the wide net?
Serious merchants and infrastructure, because if you position upstream, you would capture the wide net. I think it's important that they do have identity here because I think they might have a large swath of people that are the smaller merchants capturing a large amount of that revenue. I'm curious what percent of Shopify's revenue is enterprise?
That's a smart instinct. Position upstream, capture downstream. That's classic category leadership logic. On your enterprise question, I don't have that exact breakdown in front of me,
Yeah, I
but
have it here. So the exact breakdown, Shopify Plus enterprise accounts for approximately 30% of Shopify's monthly recurring revenue, with reports in 2026 indicating it contributed 31% to the company's $169 million MRR as of mid-2024. While representing less than 1% of the total merchant count, this segment is a major growth driver and high margin cohort for the company. So that's interesting. So that's assumptions assumed. That's why they're positioning around identity for the smaller merchants, because I think until recently they weren't really targeting the enterprise. But I still think targeting upstream is where they're going to want to go. That's my initial read.
that data point is the whole story, Troy. less than 1% of merchants driving 31% of MRR. That's not a positioning question anymore. That's a strategic identity crisis hiding in plain sight. Here's what that tells me. Their current identity language, the be the next global empire, the inspirational entrepreneur framing that was built for the 99% of merchants who contribute 69% of recurring revenue. But the growth engine, the high margin cohort, the future of the business, that's the enterprise segment. And here's the dangerous part from a positioning standpoint. If Shopify keeps leading with everyday entrepreneur energy, they may actually be signaling to enterprise clients that this platform wasn't built for them. Reitman's joining is a big deal. But did Reitman's join because of the positioning or despite it? So here's what I'm seeing as the core positioning tension for Shopify right now. They have an infrastructure story that could dominate the enterprise conversation. They have a transaction volume model that rewards serious merchants, and they have a growth trajectory that points clearly upstream. But their front door still looks like it was designed for the dreamer. My question to you, Troy, when you look at that toolkit they released today, does it feel like it's speaking to the enterprise merchant or the everyday entrepreneur? Because that might tell us exactly which direction they're actually moving.
Good question. I mean, really, the Shopify AI toolkit is here. Manage your store with your favorite agent, Claude Code, Codex, Cursor, VS Code, and more. So then there's an animation of all optimize all of my SEO, all of my products for SEO, and then it shows like Gemini, Cursor, VS Code, and Codex using and applying the same things. So I think both, because realistically, like what they're trying to project here is that it's effortless to manage Shopify inside of some of these Vibe tools. So if I go and actually click through to the Shopify toolkit page, shopify.dev, Shopify AI toolkit, I think they want to show that it's easier to edit than ever before and manage Shopify from potentially a backend as a dev, because this shopify.dev page is quite a heavy dev page. So I think they're trying to appeal to enterprise with this. Ultimately, I think they're trying to appeal to the builder world, sure, people that are actively in the tools, but they do want to display that they're on the forefront with this because I think being able to modify and make edits through the CLI is incredibly efficient.
That's a really telling signal, Troy. Shopify.dev, CLI integration, Cursor, VS Code, Codex. That's not entrepreneur language. That's infrastructure language. That's the language of the technical buyer inside an enterprise organization. And here's what's interesting about that from a positioning standpoint. They're essentially running two parallel positioning strategies. The front door of Shopify.com is speaking to the dreamer. The back door of Shopify.dev is speaking to the builder. And those are two completely different emotional triggers. The dreamer is motivated by aspiration and identity. The builder is motivated by control, efficiency, and reliability. Those are almost opposite psychological frames. So here's what I want to name clearly. What Shopify may be doing, whether intentionally or not, is a dual positioning play. And the risk of that is that neither audience feels like Shopify was built specifically for them. But here's the opportunity I see. If Shopify leaned fully into the infrastructure frame, the platform that serious builders and serious merchants run on, they could actually unify both audiences under one powerful idea. The builder builds on it. The merchant scales on it. The enterprise depends on it. Troy, here's my direct question. Do you think Shopify has a chief positioning officer level thinker driving this? Or does this feel like it evolved organically without a singular strategic hand behind it?
I think it evolved organically without a strategic hand behind it, just because if we were looking at that, we were looking at that stat around 1%. While enterprise customers represent 1% of the total merchant count, they had grown initially with all the individual small brands. However, now with them bringing on Reitmans and all these other companies, I think I think we're entering a forced digital revolution where AI is forcing everybody to become highly optimized and highly integrated into proper infrastructure so then eventually that they can implement and integrate AI. So I think it did happen organically. I don't think, and I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I do believe that if they positioned around infrastructure, they could talk to both markets simultaneously. So yeah, even if I go into here, there is an enterprise page. If I click in through to the enterprise page, it's definitely buried in the navigation. But I also think that having a position to speak to both on the main page does make the most sense. And you can tell, even just going to this page, it feels underdeveloped compared to the homepage. It just like it has a different design feel and it looks like it was kind of just put together quickly. So I can read off the headline here, but initially, like what's your read on that?
My read is exactly what you just described. That enterprise page being buried and feeling underdeveloped is not a design problem. That's a positioning problem made visible. When your highest margin, fastest growing cohort lands on a page that feels like an afterthought, you're telling that customer unconsciously that they're an afterthought. And enterprise buyers are sophisticated enough to feel that. Read me the headline on that enterprise page. I want to hear the exact language they're using because the words will tell us everything about whether they've actually committed to that audience or whether they're just checking a box.
Shopify for Enterprise. There's a little eyebrow text. The world's most innovative, scaled. This is like a ticker, powerful, innovative. Okay. The world's most powerful, scaled, innovative commerce platform. Unlock unprecedented growth on the platform that keeps enterprise ahead. Seems pretty generic. Then they have a bunch of logos at the bottom. They have a Mattel, Staples, JB Hi-Fi, Dollar Shave Club. I can't remember what sports brand that is. They have Glossier. Then they have EY shares a new report on how integrated technology drives international sales growth. Okay, that's interesting. So they are like thinking about what I mentioned earlier. Forrester Wave recognition. Shopify named a leader in B2B commerce in 2024. Forrester Wave TM. Okay. Shopify once again named a leader in 2025 Gartner Magic Quadrant analyst recognition. Total cost of ownership, TCO. Compare your platform's ownership costs using Shopify's TCO calculator. So then the next section, solutions. One platform for every way you sell. Operate your B2C, B2B, and retail markets with software built for customization, productivity, and revenue growth. Then they have three different cards here, B2C, B2B, and retail. Um, yeah, so that's what I have there. I don't think I'm going to go into the next section. Love your feedback on that. And I'd kind of like to go back to the main homepage and then start wrapping this up.
Troy, that enterprise page just confirmed everything we've been diagnosing. Let me break down what I heard. The world's most powerful, scaled, innovative commerce platform, that's three adjectives fighting each other for attention. That's not a position, that's a resume. And unlock unprecedented growth is the kind of language that every enterprise software company uses. There's nothing there that only Shopify can say. The logos are doing more positioning work than the copy is. Mattel, Staples, Glossier, those names are telling a story that the headline isn't brave enough to tell. And the Gartner and Forrester recognition, that's credibility borrowed from third parties because the positioning itself isn't strong enough to stand alone. That's a Bernays principle, actually. When your own voice isn't compelling enough, you lean on authority figures. But the strongest brands don't need that as their lead. Here's the core diagnosis, Troy. Shopify's enterprise page is positioning by committee. It's safe, it's generic, and it's trying to check every box instead of owning one powerful idea. Compare that to what you said earlier, the infrastructure underneath all of e-commerce. That one line has more power than everything on that enterprise page combined. So as we go back to the home page to wrap up, here's the question I want you to sit with. If Shopify had to own one single sentence that unified the entrepreneur, the builder, and the enterprise client, what do you think that sentence should be?
I mean, similar to what you just said, and similar to what I was saying earlier with like the number one infrastructure platform for e-commerce, the, you know, the, yeah, the top infrastructure platform for e-commerce or something along those lines. I think I said it cleanly. You said it cleanly too.
You did say it cleanly, and here's why that frame works on every level. Infrastructure speaks to the enterprise buyer because they need reliability and scale. Infrastructure speaks to the serious merchant because they need a platform they can depend on to move volume. And infrastructure actually elevates the everyday entrepreneur because now they're not just opening a store, they're building on the same foundation that Mattel and Staples run on. That's an identity upgrade. And here's the cultural momentum behind it. We are entering exactly what you described earlier, a forced digital revolution driven by AI. Every business, regardless of size, is going to need serious commerce infrastructure. Shopify is already that. They just haven't claimed it boldly enough. The positioning gap isn't capability. Shopify has the product. The gap is declaration. They haven't planted the flag and said, this is our category and we own it. So the teardown summary from my read, Troy, strong product, split personality positioning, an enterprise page that undersells their most valuable audience, and a home page that leads with inspiration when it should lead with authority. The infrastructure frame unifies all of it. What's your final take as we wrap this up? Do you think
I,
this is something Shopify needs?
sorry, do I think what?
Do you think this is something Shopify needs to fix urgently? Or is their market dominance strong enough that the positioning drift doesn't hurt them yet?
I mean, I think they have huge dominance, so I don't think it hurts them yet. But I think once they realize the revenue that's coming in from Reitmans and other large enterprise companies, and they start scaling that up, I think it would make sense to refine and define that. And I think they can actually choose, like, when people say that they're the top and they're not, I think that can disposition you. But these, like Shopify, can actually claim that they are the top number one platform. Like, I think they've earned that right in their category where it's not like, yeah, it doesn't feel displaced and disjointed.
That's exactly right. And that's a critical distinction. There's a difference between a brand that claims leadership and a brand that has earned the right to declare it. Shopify has earned it. They just haven't declared it with the confidence that matches the reality. And your point about timing is sharp. Right now, the drift is protected by dominance. But as enterprise revenue scales up and competitors like Salesforce Commerce Cloud, BigCommerce, and Adobe Commerce start targeting that same cohort with sharper enterprise positioning. That's when the lack of a unified declaration becomes a vulnerability. The window to plant that flag is before the competition forces you to, not after. So the move for Shopify, in my read, is simple. Stop splitting the positioning between dreamer and builder. Declare the infrastructure category loudly and let every audience, entrepreneur, merchant, enterprise, feel the pride of building on number one. This was a sharp teardown, Troy. You came in with good instincts and the data backed them up at every turn. The infrastructure frame, the enterprise revenue gap, the dual positioning risk, you identified all of it cleanly. Is there anything else you want to pull apart before we close this out? Or are you good?
That's it, Edward. This is fantastic. This is one of my favorite teardowns that we've done. So, anyways, thanks for tuning in. I think this is fantastic. We didn't have a chance to go into more agentic shopping, but I think we'll save that for another day. So, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you. Like, subscribe, comment. If you have any questions or anything, drop them below, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.